Mr. Vice President, nice to see you, sir.
Thank you, Greta. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for doing this. All right, it's always unusual when a former vice president challenges a former president for the office of president. I don't know if it's ever happened like this. But anyway, are there any significant policy differences between you and former President Trump?
Well, first off, let me just say I truly do believe that different times call for different leadership. And as I said today here in Des Moines, look, this country's in a lot of trouble. I mean, President Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. Our economy is struggling. As you know better than most, we have war raging in Eastern Europe, provocations in the Asia-Pacific, a crisis at our border. The list just goes on and on, including an assault on our values. And so I think now is the moment when those of us that can make a difference, have the experience to make a difference, have an obligation to step forward and try. But to your question, as I said today here in Des Moines, there are differences in our vision going forward, not only with my former running mate, but with other Republican candidates in this field, Greta. I mean, I'm somebody that believes that America is the leader of the free world, the arsenal of democracy. There are voices in our party, including my former running mate, that would walk away from that role, particularly in Eastern Europe. We have a debt crisis in our country facing our children and grandchildren. Joe Biden's policy is insolvency, and frankly, Donald Trump's policy is identical. Neither one of them are even willing to talk about some common sense reforms to entitlements to stave off that debt crisis. And on the right to life, you know me, Greta, I've always stood without apology for the sanctity of life. But we're living in a time when not only President Trump, but other candidates in the field seem to be backing away right at a moment when we've entered a new era for life in America. But I'll always stand strong for the sanctity of life. I'll look to advance the interests of the unborn. And I think those are some of the issues going forward that will help define the choice that people here in Iowa and around the country face.
Well, one of the things that you raised in your announcement today is you said January 6th was a tragic day in life of our nation. President Trump's words were reckless and endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol. Do you think he intended to do that, to hurt you and your family and endanger, or do you think that was an accident, or how do you describe? I mean, what was his intention?
Look, I would just tell you, Greta, that it was a tragic day, and I wanted to address it today head on. I wanted people to understand why I did what I did, which, well, I did.
got that, and we all saw that we saw you do that. But what do you think because this is a very important issue, because he's the front runner. Do you think that he intended for those consequences?
Greta, I don't know what he intended, but as I've said many times, I said again today, his words were reckless that day. And with my wife, my daughter, our team at our side, I thought he endangered all of us at the Capitol by literally calling me out while a riot was unfolding. But that was not the core of my message today. The core I wanted to convey to people is that also in the midst of that, that President Trump asked me to choose between him and the Constitution. I had taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I laid out today, and your viewers can go and look at it themselves, where in Article 2, Section 3, it clearly states the duties that I had presiding over a joint session of Congress to open and count votes. And I know in my heart of hearts that we did our duty that day, and I wanted people to understand that we kept our oath. As the Bible said, kept our oath even when it hurts. And at the end of the day, I'll always believe that we did our duty that day under the Constitution and the laws of this country.
You know, looking back over the last 15 years or so, you've got Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton with the server. You've got Vice President Biden with the documents at his home. You've got the documents at your home, and you've got the documents at Mar-a-Lago. In my wildest dreams, because I know all four of you, I do not think any one of you intended to hurt the country. I just don't. I think you're all sloppy. But do you think it's fair that President Trump has a special counsel investigating him for that and the other three do not?
Well, look, I was pleased. We fully cooperated with the Justice Department, but those documents had no business being in my residence. We reported it promptly, and I'm pleased the Department of Justice has recognized it was an innocent mistake, but it was a mistake. But look, from the time that we notified the FBI that we had the documents, they were at my home in one day. The contrast with the way Joe Biden was treated about documents that he had collected when he was vice president is I think the number was 80 days. And, of course, I expressed frustration last summer when the Justice Department executed an unprecedented search warrant against the home of a former president of the United States. Look, we've got to have equal treatment under the law in this country. And my hope going forward is that as these issues are resolved by the current president and the former president, that the American people will see that, because we certainly have had plenty of reason, as you know well, Greta, to be frustrated, and frankly, millions of Americans are deeply concerned about the impact of partisan politics at the Department of Justice. The Durham report confirming that the Russian investigation should never even been started. And that went on for 2.5 years in our administration and literally was a nonstop on virtually every other network save one in the country. And so, look, we got to have equal treatment under the law. I'm glad our issue was resolved, and my full expectation is that we will expect and frankly demand that the former president and the current president receive the same treatment and the same review.
Does that mean that President Biden should have a special counsel if they get the same?
Well, my understanding is that he does, Greta, that they've submitted that to a different special counsel than President Trump. But it's still operating under a special counsel provision, and I think that's appropriate when you have politics involved, when you have office holders and former office holders and candidates involved. But my hope is that they work through this issue, at least with regard to in my case there were innocent mistakes, and my hope is that we resolve these issues and ultimately just take this whole question, whether it's a Republican primary or the general election, to the American people.
Well, as I noted, I'm not all whooped up about these documents because, like, I know all four of you, and honestly, I'm not worried about any four of you. And I see this as sort of a political problem that's exploded with the media as well weighing in on it. All right, let me turn now to immigration. There's a lot of discussion about what's going on at the border, but there's very little, almost no discussion about the people coming from, I think, 189 countries when I was there in April, coming to the bottom of the Darien Gap. Would you approach immigration differently, not just at the border, but also about the people who are trying to come here, how you would address that, because they're the ones overloading the border?
Well, look, we have a broken immigration system, Greta. I don't have to tell you that. I mean, not only is our border broken, and the cartels are essentially in operational control of the border, but we have a system that with chain migration and these antiquated rules does not serve the American people. So if I'm president of the United States, I promise you we're going to finish the wall. We're going to put Remain in Mexico back into effect. We're going to use Title 42 again, every means where we reduced illegal immigration and asylum abuse by 90% in our administration. But then we're going to do the next step, which is we're going to bring the Congress together, engage the American people, and redesign this immigration system on a merit basis. You know, I mentioned my grandfather today in my announcement speech here in Iowa. My grandfather, Richard Michael Cawley, is how Michael Richard Pence got to be Vice President of the United States. He came through Ellis Island, but he had to get a certificate as a tailor. He was trained in clothing and tailoring before he could come, because they had criteria before you come that were focused on the needs of our economy. That's what we have to get back to. That's how you put the interests of the country and our economy first, and that's what a 21st century immigration system should look like.
Well, Mr. Vice President, I very much enjoyed reading your book. Now that you're running for president, I'm going to have to read it again, so I'm sure I'll enjoy it a second time. Thank you very much for joining me, sir.
Thank you, Greta. Great to be with you.